one and all, once again back to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast where I'm your host Jackson, and I go through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I've been having quite a bit of fun, not only with exploring Arda, which is huge and pretty much my main show that is on my channel, but I'm glad that some of you guys have checked out my traversing through Terra, which is basically my nature hikes. Just like another one of my main hobbies that I like to do is just kind of go out on hikes and biking and walking and all that stuff. And so I'm glad that you guys have checked those out. I greatly appreciate it. And also thank you for watching some of the Grim Captivation new show. It won't be as often. It might be like a once per month kind of thing. But it's just kind of like something small off to the side that I just kind of wanted to delve into a little bit. Not too much, because I'm doing more of exploring Arda, that my main passion, but thank you guys for checking out the other stuff on my channel. So, with all that being said, we will be going back into the fall of Númenor. So, so from the last time, we are hearing a bunch of Sauron's rising might in Middle-earth, especially in Middle-earth. And he crafted the Ring of Power, along with pretty much making the elves kind of almost like betraying them in a way of making their, obviously, more Rings of Power. And so, like, his treachery kind of, like, I guess, like, starts over again, because in the Silmarillion, he was also very well known for that, for his, I guess his willpower, I suppose, of just treachery and betrayal of, elf against elf, or man against man. He can really, really pit a lot of the races of Middle-earth against each other, so, and that's what really makes him a very, very formidable foe, I suppose you should say, so. Now, we'll be going into multiple little segments here, and what I'll do is I won't read off all of the segments, and I'll just kind of read through it, otherwise it kind of like interrupts the pace, so here we go. The War of the Elves and Sauron begins the Three Rings... hold on, I'm going to restart that. War of the Elves and Sauron begins. There you go. The Three Rings are hidden. But Sauron, finding that he was betrayed and that the elves were not deceived, was filled with wrath, and he came against them with open war, demanding that all the rings should be delivered to him, since the elven smiths could not have attained to their making without his lore and counsel. But the elves fled from him, and 3 of their rings they saved, and bore them away and hid them. Now these were the 3 that had last been made, and they possessed the greatest powers. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, they were named, the rings of fire and of water and of air, set with ruby and adamant and sapphire. And of all the elven rings, Sauron most desired to possess them, for those who had them in their keeping could ward off the decays of time and postpone the weariness of the world. But Sauron could not discover the 3, for they were given into the hands of the wise, who concealed them and never again used them openly, while Sauron kept the ruling ring. Therefore the 3 remained unsullied, for they were forged by Celebrimbor alone, and the hand of Sauron had never touched them, yet they were also subject to the One. From that time war never ceased between Sauron and the elves. When Sauron learned of the repentance and revolt of Celebrimbor, his disguise fell and his wrath was revealed, and gathering a great force he moved over Calenardon, Rohan, to the invasion of Eriador in the year 1695. When news of this reached Gil-galad, he sent out a force under Elrond Half-Elven, but Elrond had far to go, and Sauron turned north and made at once for Eregion. The scouts and vanguard of Sauron's hosts were already approaching when Celeborn made a sortie and drove them back. But though he was able to join his force to that of Elrond, they could not return to Eregion, for Sauron's host was far greater than theirs, great enough both to hold them off and closely to invest Eregion. At last the attackers broke into Eregion with ruin and devastation and captured the chief object of Sauron's assault, the house of the Myrdain, where were their smithies and their treasures. Celebrimbor, desperate himself, withstood Sauron on the steps of the great door of the Myrdain, but he was grappled and taken captive, and the house was ransacked. There Sauron took the 9 rings and other lesser works of the Mirrodin, but the 7 and the 3 he could not find. Then Celebrimbor was put to torment, and Sauron learned from him where the 7 were bestowed. This Celebrimbor revealed, because neither the 7 nor the 9 did he value as he valued the 3. The 7 and the 9 were made with Sauron's aid, whereas the 3 were made by Celebrimbor alone, with a different power and purpose. Concerning the 3 rings, Sauron could learn nothing from Celebrimbor, and he had him put to death. But he guessed the truth, that the 3 had been committed to elvish guardians, and that must mean to Galadriel and Gil-galad. In black anger he turned back to battle, and bearing as a banner Celebrimbor's body hung upon a pole, shot through with orc arrows, he turned upon the forces of Elrond. Elrond had gathered such few of the elves of Eregion as had escaped, but he had no force to withstand the onset. He would indeed have been overwhelmed had not Sauron's host been attacked in the rear, for Durin sent out a force of dwarves from Khazad-dûm, and with them came elves of Lorinand, led by Amroth. Elrond was able to extricate himself, but he was forced away northwards, and it was at that time that he established a refuge and stronghold at Imladris, Rivendell. Sauron withdrew the pursuit of Elrond and turned upon the dwarves and the elves of Lorinand, whom he drove back. But the gates of Moria were shut and he could not enter. Even afterwards, Moria had Sauron's hate, and all orcs were commanded to harry dwarves wherever they might. Alright, so I'm going to do a little bit of a quick break here. So, with the might of the elves, both the might and the knowledge, and I would say the elves also have a little bit of willpower too to kind of boast about. They pretty much know that Sauron is he is a treacherous villain to really go against, but nevertheless they still do, and they manage to kind of hold him and his forces back. I would assume that Sauron's not at his fullest might quite yet, I would say, but he's still very much like his power over Middle Earth, and especially over Eregion. I don't think this is his full force, and even then, it's still a force that drives elves back and defeats them, and he ends up killing Celebrimbor because of pretty much Celebrimbor never really tells him where the 3 rings are at because he made them himself instead of Sauron being directly implemented and with the process and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of things happen during this time period, and it is definitely the rise of Sauron in the Second Age, which is terrifying. So not only was he dangerous in the Silmarillion, I feel like this second time in the Second Age, he knows his strong points and he uses them very well, almost too well, so that he can overthrow the elves and the race of Ben and pretty much try to dominate the land because he's the bad guy. So I don't know. But yeah, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So let's get back to it. Right, and this one says Sauron overruns Eriador. And I'm not going to do that every single time, but just for this one. So. But now Sauron attempted to gain the mastery of Eriador. Lorinand could wait. But as he ravaged the lands, slaying or drawing off all the small groups of men and hunting the remaining elves, many fled to swell Elrond's host to the northward. Now Sauron's immediate purpose was to take Lindon, where he believed that he had the most chance of seizing one or more of the 3 rings, and he called in, therefore, his scattered forces and marched west towards the land of Gil-galad, ravaging as he went. But his force was weakened by the necessity of leaving a strong detachment to contain Elrond and prevent him coming down upon his rear. As a result, not only did the great city of Khazad-dûm become a dwelling for the orcs of Sauron, but the eager delving of the dwarves had aroused a Balrog. Many years later, at the Council of Elrond, Gloin the dwarf reflected on the catastrophe. Too deep we delved there, and woke the nameless fear. Long have its vast mansions laid empty since the children of Durin fled. No dwarf has dared to pass the doors of Khazad-dûm for many lives of kings, save Thror only, and he perished. An ancient dwarvish lament speaks of the most splendor of Khazad-dûm. The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone, when Durin woke and walked alone. He named the nameless hills and dells, he drank from yet untasted wells. He stooped and looked in Mirrormere, and saw a crown of stars appear, as gems upon a silver thread above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, and elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was on carven throne, in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silvered floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon, in shining lamps of crystal hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, there shone forever fair and bright. There hammer on the anvil smote, there chisel clove, and graver wrote. There forged was blade, and bound was hilt, the delver mind the mason built. There beryl, pearl, and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail. Buckler and corselet, yep, there you go, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountains music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. The world is grey, the mountains old, the forge's fire is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammers fall. The darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria, in Khazad-dûm. But still the sunken stars appear, in dark and windless Mirrormere. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. So, I'm going to do a very brief break for that. So yeah, there's the dwarvish tale of that. Pretty much Khazad-dûm used to be a great and splendorous dwarven kingdom, and and they pretty much mined very, very, they delved very deep and found all these precious, gems and stones and ores. But now, for Khazad-dûm, it kind of lays empty because of pretty much the darkness of the Second Age, and orcs are plundering, and it just becomes a place of distant memories. They sing in songs and stuff and poetry, but they don't return back to it, and it kind of it's more of a sad song. It's it's the lament. I think that's what it was said. Yeah, it is a lament. So, and it is a bummer, really. I mean, it's a whole kingdom, dwarven kingdom of their own technology that they pretty much mastered. So, and now it's just laid to waste. So, and then now back to the story here. So, this one says, Tar Minister sends a great navy from Númenor to Lindon. Sauron is defeated. So, now for long years the Númenorians had brought in their ships to the Great Havens, and there they were welcome. As soon as Gil-galad began to fear that Sauron would come with open war into Eriador, he sent messages to Númenor, and on the shores of Lindon the Númenorians began to build up a force and supplies for war. In 1695, when Sauron invaded Eriador, Gil-galad called on Númenor for aid. Then Tar Minister, the king, sent out a great navy, but it was delayed, and did not reach the coast of Middle-earth until the year 1700. By that time, Sauron had mastered all Eriador, save only besieged Imladris, and had reached the line of the river Lune. He had summoned more forces, which were approaching from the southeast, and were indeed in Enedwaith at the crossing of Tharbad, which only lightly held. Gil-galad and the Númenorians were holding the Lune in desperate defense of the Grey Havens, where in the very nick of time, the great armament of Tar Minister came in, and Sauron's host was heavily defeated and driven back. The Númenorian admiral Eriador, shipmaster, sent part of his ships to make a landing further to the south. Sauron was driven away southeast, but after great slaughter at Sarn Ford, the crossing of the Baranduin, and though strengthened by his forces at Tharbad, he suddenly found a host of the Númenorians again in his rear. For Eriador had put a strong force ashore at the mouth of the Greyflood, where there was a small Númenorian harbor. This was Vignalande of Tar Aldarion, afterwards called Lond Dare. In the Battle of the Gwathlo, Sauron was routed utterly, and he himself only narrowly escaped. Sauron's small remaining force was assailed in the east of Calenardon, there you go, and he was with no more than a bodyguard fled to the region afterwards called Dagorlad, Battle Plain. Once broken and humiliated, he returned to Mordor and vowed vengeance upon Númenor. The army that was besieging Imladris was caught between Elrond and Gil-galad, and utterly destroyed. Eriador was cleared of the enemy, but lay largely in ruins. At this time, the First White Council was held, and it was there determined that an elvish stronghold in the east of Eriador should be maintained in Imladris rather than in Eregion. At that time, also, Gil-galad gave Vilya the Blue Ring to Elrond, and appointed him to be his vice-regent in Eriador. But the Red Ring he kept, until he gave it to Círdan when he set out from Lindon in the days of the Last Alliance. For many years the Westlands had peace, and time in which to heal their wounds. It is told of Galadriel that at this time a strong sea-longing grew in her. Though Galadriel deemed it her duty to remain in Middle-earth, while Sauron was still unconquered, she determined to leave Lorinand and to dwell near the sea. She committed Lorinand to Amroth, and passing again through Moria with Celebrian, she came to Imladris, seeking Celeborn. There it seems she found him, and there they dwelt together for a long time, and it was then that Elrond first saw Celebrian and loved her, though he said nothing of it. It was while Galadriel was in Imladris that the council referred to above was held, but at some later time there is no indication of the date. Galadriel and Celeborn, together with Celebrian, departed from Imladris and went to little inhabited lands between the mouth of the Gwathlo and Ethir Anduin. There they dwelt in Belfalas, at the place that was afterwards called Dol Amrath. There Amrath, their son, at times visited them, and their company was swelled by Nandoran elves from Lorinand. It was not until far in the Third Age, when Amroth was lost and Lorinand was in peril, that Galadriel returned there in the year 1981. So, I'm going to probably finish up this small thing. It just says about Tar Ministir. This name he had because he built a high tower upon the hill of Oramet, nigh to Andunier and the west shores, and thence would spend great part of his days gazing westward. For the yearning was grown strong in the hearts of the Númenorians. He loved the Eldar, but envied them. He it was who had sent a great fleet to the aid of Gil-galad in the first war against Sauron. So a little brief thing for Tar Ministir, kind of like going back to Númenor a little bit, because this is very, I guess, like elven heavy, and really like the Silmarillion is very, very much elven heavy. So if you think about it, but yeah, it's kind of like the reason. I wouldn't say the reason why he pretty much took revenge against the Númenorians, but he got so far west towards Lindon, which is very much like in the Third Age. It's very much like literally the western shore. I think I have a map up there. There's like Harlindon and Forlindon, and that's kind of west of the Shire even. So he gets all the way literally from Mordor all the way over there, and Eriador is like this huge land that he begins to cover, and then the Númenorians show up and they start to pretty much fight back and really take that side of the war. And so now, he gets angry at them because he was dominating literally the whole of Middle-earth, and this is only in the Second Age. And while I'm reading this, it kind of reminds me that when Elrond in the Third Age was so very much worried that Sauron is regaining his strength again, he was terrified. And I'm like, well, now I know specifically why. There was a siege against Imladris in the Second Age, and so of course that's terrifying if he would have to relive that. So I can now, I guess, understand his fear a little bit more, which makes it even more terrifying for him. So but then Sauron's forces kind of get pretty much demolished, and then only he and another guy pretty much ends up going back to Mordor in shame, I guess, something like that. So but we will continue on. So here we go. The Númenorians had tasted power in Middle-earth, and from that time forward they began to make permanent settlements on the western coasts, becoming too powerful Sauron to attempt to move west out of Mordor for a long time. The Númenorians had now become great mariners, exploring all the seas eastward, and they began to yearn for the west and the forbidden waters. And the more joyful was their life, the more they began to long for the immortality of the Eldar. And then it takes a little bit of a break here with Tar Kiryatan. The first sign of the shadow that was to fall upon them had appeared in the days of Tar Minastir, 11th king. His son, Kiriotan, scorned the yearnings of his father and eased the restlessness of his heart by voyaging east and north and south until he took the scepter. It is said that he constrained his father to yield to him, ere of his free will he would. In this way, it is held, might the first coming of the shadow upon the bliss of Númenor be seen. Tar Kiriotan built a great fleet of royal ships, and his servants brought back great store of metals and gems, and oppressed the men of Middle-earth. Moreover, after Minastir, the kings became greedy of wealth and power. At first, the Númenorians had come to Middle-earth as teachers and friends of lesser men afflicted by Sauron, but now their havens became fortresses, holding wide coastlands in subjection. These things took place in the days of Tar Kiriotan, the shipbuilder, and of Tar Atanamir, his son, and they were both proud men, eager for wealth, and they laid the men of Middle-earth under tribute, taking now rather than giving. And then it skips over to Tar Atanamir, the Great, as it says, the Great. Much is said of this king in the annals, such as now survive the downfall. For he was like his father, proud and greedy of wealth, and the Númenorians in his service exacted heavy tribute from the men of the coast and Middle-earth. In this time the shadow fell upon Númenor, and the king, and those that followed his lore, spoke openly against the ban of the Valar, and their hearts were turned against the Valar and the Eldar. It was Tar Atanamir who first spoke openly against the ban, and declared that the life of the Eldar was his by right. Thus the shadow deepened, and the thought of death darkened the hearts of the people. And I'm actually going to do a really quick break here. So, just because this is a very important part, because Númenor used to be pretty much what it said, that it was supposed to be like this, I guess, like free in a way, quote unquote, free people trying to live their lives closest to the Valar and Valinor, but not close enough that, that they can actually get there. But they were pretty much like teachers and almost like defenders for Middle-earth, especially during their defense against Sauron. But over time, I suppose, like, the kings are just like, yeah, we have all this might, we have, knowledge of the seas and whatnot, so now they start getting pretty much, like, stubborn and selfish, so, and that definitely can bring a place down, really, so, and it's around that time that the darkness, obviously, with, like, bad rulers, that pretty much it starts to become their downfall in a way, so. Now we'll get back to it again, so. Now the yearning of the Númenorians grew ever greater with the years, and they began to hunger for the undying city that they saw from afar, and the desire of everlasting life, to escape from death, and the ending of delight, grew strong upon them, and ever as their power and glory grew, greater their unquiet increased. For though the Valar had rewarded them the Dunedain with long life, they could not take from them the weariness of the world that comes at last, and they died, even their kings of the seed of Arendelle, and the span of their lives was brief in the eyes of the Eldar. Thus it was that a shadow fell upon them, in which maybe the will of Morgoth was at work that still moved in the world. And the Númenorians began to murmur, at first in their hearts, and then in open words, against the doom of men, and most of all against the ban which forbade them to sail into the west. And they said amongst themselves, why do the lords of the west sit there in peace, unending, while we must die and go we know not whither, leaving our home and all that we have made? And the Eldar die not, even those that rebelled against the lords. And since we have mastered all seas, and no water is so wild or wide that our ships cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Avalone, and greet there our friends? And some there who said, why should we not go even to Aman, and taste there were it but for a day, the bliss of the powers. Have we not become mighty among the people of Arda? The Eldar reported these words to the Valar, and Manwë was grieved, seeing a cloud gather on the noontide of Númenor. And he sent messengers to the Dunedain, who spoke earnestly to the king, and to all who would listen, concerning the fate and fashion of the world. The doom of the world, they said, one alone can change who made it. And were you so to voyage that, escaping all deceits and snares, you came indeed to Aman, the blessed realm, little would it profit you. For it is not the land of Manwë that makes its people deathless, but the deathless that dwell therein have hallowed the land. And there you would but wither and grow weary the sooner, as moths in a light too strong and steadfast. But the king said, And does not Arundel my forefather live, or is he not in the land of Aman? To which they answered, You know that he has a fate apart, and was a judge to the firstborn who die not. Yet this also is his doom, that he can never return again to mortal lands. Whereas you and your people are not of the firstborn, but are mortal men as Iluvatar made you. Yet it seems that you desire now to have the good of both kindreds, to sail to Valinor when you will, and to return when you please to your homes. That cannot be. Nor can the Valar take away the gifts of Iluvatar. The Eldar, you say, are unpunished, and even those who rebel do not die. Yet that is to them neither reward nor punishment, but the fulfillment of their being. They cannot escape, and are bound to this world, never to leave it so long as it lasts, for its life is theirs. And you are punished for the rebellion of men, you say, in which you had small part, and so it is that you die. But that was not at first appointed for a punishment. Thus you escape and leave the world, and are not bound to it, in hope or in weariness. Which of us therefore should envy the others? Then the Númenorians answered, Why should we not envy the Valar, or even the least of the deathless? For of us is required a blind trust, and a hope without assurance, knowing not what lies before us in a little while. And yet we also love the earth and would not lose it. Then the messengers said, Indeed, the mind of Iluvatar concerning you is not known to the Valar, but he has revealed all things that are to come. But this we hold to be true, that your home is not here, neither in the land of Aman nor anywhere within the circles of the world. And the doom of men, that they should depart, was at first a gift of Iluvatar. It became a grief to them only because, coming under the shadow of Morgoth, it seemed to them that they were surrounded by a great darkness, of which they were afraid, and some grew willful and proud and would not yield, until life was reft from them. We who bear the ever-mounting burden of the years do not clearly understand this, but if that grief has returned to trouble you, as you say, then we fear that the shadow arises once more and grows again in your hearts. Therefore, though you be the Dunedain, fairest of men, who escaped from the shadow of old, and fought valiantly against it, we say to you, Beware! The will of Eru may not be gainsaid, and the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust to which you are called, lest soon it become against a bond by which you are constrained. Hope rather that in the end even the least of your desires shall have fruit. The love of Arda was set in your hearts by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, many ages of men unborn may pass ere that purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar. It was to Tar Atanamir that the messengers came, and he was the 13th king, and in his day the realm of Númenor had endured for more than 2,000 years, and was come to the zenith of its bliss, if not yet of its power. But Atanamir was ill-pleased with the counsel of the messengers, and gave little heed to it, and the greater part of his people followed him, for they wished still to escape death in their own day, not waiting upon hope. And Atanamir lived to a great age, clinging to his life beyond the end of all joy, and he was the first of the Númenorians to do this, refusing to depart until he was witless and unmanned, and denying to his son the kingship at the height of his days. For the lords of Númenor had been wont to wed late in their long lives, and to depart and leave the mastery to their sons, when these were come to full stature of body and mind. Thus Tar Atanamir is also called the Unwilling, for he was the first of the kings to refuse to lay down his life, or to renounce the scepter, and he lived until death took him perforce in dotage. In this age, as is elsewhere told, Sauron rose again in Middle-earth, and grew, and turned back to the evil in which he was nurtured by Morgoth, becoming mighty in his service. Already in the days of Tar-Minastir, the 11th king of Númenor, he had fortified the land of Mordor and had built there the Tower of Barad-dûr, and thereafter he strove ever for the dominion of Middle-earth, to become king over all kings, and as a god unto men. And Sauron hated the Númenorians, because of the deeds of their fathers, and their ancient alliance with the elves and allegiance to the Valar. Nor did he forget the aid that Tar-Minastir had rendered to Gil-galad of old, in that time when the One Ring was forged, and there was war between Sauron and the elves in Eriador. Now he learned that the kings of Númenor had increased in power and splendor, and he hated them more, and he feared them, lest they should invade his lands and wrest from him the dominion of the east. But for a long time he did not dare to challenge the lords of the sea, and he withdrew from the coast. Alright, so we will take a little bit of a break, and I think it will be the end of the episode really quick. Good half hour. So, yeah, Right, so Númenorians are becoming a little more stubborn, and I would say that definitely falls into the mankind trait, I should say, that they're very stubborn and ultimately, I'm not really like selfish, but you can see a lot of them are. So that's why I say like not all of them are selfish and stubborn, but there's a very huge trait among them about that. So they're pretty much arguing between them and or between mankind, the Númenorians, and the Valar. Pretty much, they're like, hey, this isn't fair that that the Eldar get to live forever, and we have to die so soon, and they're always kind of like around us. But they're like, hey, well, listen, like this, living forever is both like it's not a blessing and it's not a curse. It's like that weird in between. So they try to like explain that to them, and they still just end up like, no, like this still isn't fair. And while they are kind of arguing back and forth, Sauron is pretty much just trying to regain his power once again, and he remembers that the Númenorians helped Gil-galad in their defense of Eriador and of the West, pretty much. And so he pretty much just like sits in Mordor, kind of brooding with hatred, and building Barad-dûr, which is immensely important. And it just does bring me back to the point where like he does have the One Ring right now, and obviously, especially like in the last Alliance battle, that's where he pretty much has this big, almost like advantage. And like even with the One Ring, he still is defeated. So he just kind of is. It makes me wonder that like even in the Second Age, maybe he still wasn't at his full strength, his full might, even right now. Because I mean, yeah, he covered pretty much Eriador in complete darkness, which was terrible to, I guess, just kind of go through for the elves and the men. But perhaps maybe that's why he was able to, that he had the One Ring in his grasp. And I guess with every villain there is a limit to it. It's not like like he has his spirit that keeps returning, but like physically there's there are limits. So I suppose I kind of answered my own question there. So but I think that's everything that I would cover for today. It is pretty much everything that I planned to cover for today. So I'm hoping that this Fall of Númenor comes between 10 to 15 parts. Just because it is like, I suppose, like a bigger book, I suppose, but I don't know if you guys can see it, this little bookmark here. So we are getting pretty close, actually, not close to the end, but we're very much more than halfway through. So very excited for that. So I guess at the end of the episode, now that we're at the end here, be sure again to check out my other segments of my channel, which is Traversing Through Terra, which is my my nature and my hiking episodes that I'm having a lot of fun with. I'm trying to like be better at like camera angles and taking a little better pictures. So and I can only do so much with just a phone. I don't have an actual like GoPro. I don't have like a professional camera. I just kind of do what I can. So especially like nowadays it's very hard to save up for expensive things for hobbies like that. So, and then for Grim Captivation, I have a lot of things planned for it, delving deeper into the paranormal, and kind of just giving people like just like not only broad definitions, but just like unbiased things. Like I believe in some paranormal things and some I don't, but I'll still give you guys kind of what pretty much a lot of things in the paranormal field are and are about. Cool stuff. And yeah, so I hope you guys check those out. And also, lastly, be sure to check out my fantasy book, The Lands of Ordia, Power of Heaven, on Amazon. And I am still writing the second book. It's taking a little longer than I thought, but it is a book that is, the second book is, I feel, a little bit better more emotion and more spiritualism kind of implemented into it. So I hope you guys check out Power of Heaven, and hopefully when the second one comes out, it'll be a big announcement, but hope you guys will be patiently waiting for it. So I think with everything being said, just stay tuned for another episode. May the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell.